Welcome to the April 6th, 2017 regularly scheduled meeting, the Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment. If you have a cell phone with you, if you would turn it off or down or whatever you have to do to make sure it doesn't make any noise, that would be very much appreciated. We'll start with the receipt of the minutes from the last meeting.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to receive the minutes of the March 16th, 2017 meeting. If you would cast your votes, please. They are received. Continuance requests. We don't seem to have any from staff.
No continuance.
Do we have any from the public? Anybody that has anything they want to see continue today? No? So let's keep moving. Public hearing, we don't seem to have consent docket items. So we'll start with item number 1.
Item number 1, case number 14330, request of Rudy Construction Company for a variance to the requirement that a sidewalk be constructed along an arterial street. Frontage for any new construction at the I-2 in Moderate Industrial District located at 3101 Northeast 63rd Street.
Good afternoon, Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates representing the applicant. And I apologize for not being here at the last meeting. It fell off my calendar somehow. And I appreciate Mr. Box's endeavors to try and save face.
Just wait till you hear all the things he agreed to on your behalf.
Yeah, that's the part I'm worried about. So something that came to light, though, in the last meeting was there was a staff member from Public Works, I think, that mentioned to you all that the Public Works Department has been working with the City Attorney's Office and have worked out some sort of arrangement to allow for fees to be paid on arterial roads that are, we're in a category of two things. One is we're not on a GEO-bond issue, and we're a rural typical section. What that means is we have storm sewer issues that are in the bar ditch next to the road, which increases the right-of-way requirements and pushes the sidewalk further from the road. That's our big deal. So I did receive an email, and I tried to talk to Ms. Miller over the last couple of days, but I did receive an email on Tuesday that confirmed that that's what they're doing, but I was not clear that it had been anything official has been done. That it's been a conversation, and I don't know if Ms. McDivitt knows anything about it. So that's as far as I was able to go. The issue here, and I can show you the pictures again, but I showed it the first time where you asked us to continue, is that to put the sidewalk in, we'd be some 80 feet into our property to build a sidewalk, which is well beyond the right-of-way. There's only 33 feet of statutory right-of-way in this section. At some point in time, somebody's going to need to fix this bridge and build this road, and the cost of constructing the sidewalk on this project would be peanuts to the cost of that project. The land east of the creek falls straight off. There's no bar ditch. Off the shoulder of the road, it falls straight 15 feet down. That is an industrial zone property, is now being used to store dirt from the 235 interchange. So there's a lot of heavy traffic on this road. It's an industrial developed area. This is just a location that sidewalk is just not a safe idea, number one, because we'd be pushing the pedestrian out on the outside of the creek, as close to the creek as we could possibly build it. And like I said, it meanders. It would be some 80 feet away at its furthest part. So we do feel like in this particular case, because the planning staff was not aware of any ability for a fee to be paid, so they took our application. Our client has spent, and I know money is not your deal, but we've spent $5,000, $6,000 to this point, of which could be applied towards what would be a $25,000 fee. They don't have the option anymore. We're not going to get a refund. So I think that is a hardship for them because the staff didn't know, and neither did we as the applicant. And we do dozens of these, as you know. This is a particularly unique piece of property because of the creek and the depth of the creek and the size of the drainage way that goes across the front of this property. As I mentioned before, there's no other sidewalks, and I know that's not the policy. The city's policy is, and nobody supports that better than this contractor. They build probably 80% of the sidewalks for the city. Rudy Construction is well known for Project 180. They're building the trail that we designed from Lake Hefner to the river. They're in the business of supporting sidewalks. So if they could do it, they would do it. Obviously, they could build it a lot cheaper than $25 a foot. So it's just not possible. So we would fall before this body and request that you allow this variance. And I think we do meet the statutory criteria, given the fact that nobody knew that a fee could be paid.
I have a question. Why would the staff report include this from Public Works if there was no, guideline for what the fee should be? Because, I mean, it puts us between a rock and a hard place. I mean, Tim, you know our position on this, is that the problem with the variance, in our view, I think, and I'm speaking for myself and I think all of us, is that, a forever variance is not what we want to do, but we take into consideration, and I think all of us are on board with the fact that this site is not, compatible with a sidewalk at this time. But do we want to lay the groundwork where there is never a sidewalk requirement imposed? So we had talked about, whether we condition it on zoning or something else so that if use changes, then, the sidewalk requirement is imposed.
And I'm just hearing the two of you speak about that. I mean, on the one hand, I would not be averse at all to some deduction from the fee in lieu for the amount of money that's been spent to this point in terms of the application and so on, if that were something that we had any reason to think might be worked out between now and the next time we meet. Part of what I think I hear you say is, if it were physically possible to build a sidewalk, you could build it cheaper than the city would.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, would it be possible for us then to condition the variance on, either a change of use in this case of this not being used as it is currently, or at the time that the street is widened, you'll commit to do the sidewalks then. Is that possible? Can we do that?
If the street is widened, the city does the sidewalks, am I correct?
Well, I'm sure the city would be more than happy to let Rudy Construction do their own sidewalks.
But if there's a street widening project, I mean, generally that's a component of it, isn't the sidewalks would be installed by the city at their expense. I think we've done this before and we've conditioned it on use.
That's the only condition that I recall us ever enforcing. I mean, during my time here, but it's the issue there is one of enforcement. I mean, I don't even know if that condition would be enforceable, much less if and who would remember to enforce it. At the time that Public Works project was undertaken, that's really the issue. And I'm with Jeff. I don't see how we put it on a condition, in lieu of fee when we don't have a number, because we'd have to have a hard, and we've never done that before. So, I mean, Lauren, we talked about this a little bit, but what's the city and staff's position on the ability of us to condition that on a fee in lieu?
Yeah, I don't know that is something that's been looked at, really. I know that we've only really looked at conditioning variances for a period of time or on use, but that's all that I'm familiar with. As far as fees in lieu go, I don't know how we might set that up.
Tim, my issue with it is just we have had every variance is looked at individually, but we have had instances where there have been sidewalk issues that resulted in public safety concerns. So flood-prone areas, bar ditches, things that really precluded it from making sense to require a public sidewalk the way that the ordinance set out. It's not a city policy that we're looking at. It's a city ordinance that we're looking at, and there's a clear guideline there. There's a clear guide from the city about the ordinance that this is what they're after. And we have comments from the planning department and from Public Works saying, make them put the sidewalk in. And so it's really hard to, this is one of those instances, I think pretty rare, where there's not a lot of gray area, and it makes it hard for me to support the application when there is a way to do it, it's just not ideal. I'm struggling to get there.
Well, the only way to do it would be to push the sidewalk some 80 feet away from the street and put it up against their fence.
And that's why I say I'm struggling to get there. It's a good choice of words, because I understand what you're saying about the complexity of this situation. I just can't get there in terms of, is this really an example of when we should go against a clear ordinance to install and require the construction of sidewalks? I mean, I would be okay with a condition of zoning change if we were going to do it. That's the only way I can think of doing it, but I don't know.
And we'd be okay with that as well. If the use changes out there, it would only probably be because the street's been improved.
But we have the ordinance, the fee in lieu of, and that has been in prior items, and it's on the books. At one time, it was my understanding you had to have a stated project before the fee in lieu of would be activated. But it's my understanding, but I don't know specifically the details, that possibly one could be established, the fee could be established, the in lieu of fee. I'm in favor of the in lieu of fee as a condition. I don't know any particulars about that. It's possible there is some development out there, and I understand your position regarding where it had to be placed if you had to place it today. So it's a real quandary for me at this point in time, because granting the variance by itself, except for changing zoning, might not accomplish the result that eventually that gets widened and the applicant hasn't paid for the widening and paid for the sidewalk.
If we condition the variance on zoning, where is that recorded so that someone 3 years from now sees that the zoning has changed and go, oh, by the way, this Board of Adjustment acted 3 years ago to do this and conditioned a sidewalk on this variance? Where, if anywhere, is that recorded?
I'm not sure where it's recorded, but I'm not actually in favor of that. I'm not particularly in favor of conditioning it against the zoning, partly because the zoning is not likely to change. It's going to, or really is the use.
I do have a question to the municipal councilor about that, and so.
I think that issue would arise when they apply for a building permit. Or
Be under zoning review, would it not?
Right.
Yeah.
Or a certificate of occupancy whenever they're changing their use.
So our decision here today would be, I understand where it comes up, but where is it recorded so the institution, being the city, remembers what action we took?
In the zoning record for the property. I mean, they each have one, so.
It would be recorded in the zoning record for this property if we did that?
Yes.
Okay.
Tim, I know you don't have another thing in the world to do but keep coming back here every 2 weeks, but I wonder if it would be worthwhile, and maybe I'm the only person who's interested in doing this, but I would be interested in whether Public Works would be comfortable with a conditioned variance that would require the installation of the sidewalk or the payment of the fee in lieu, whichever, at the time that the street is improved. And I get that you're saying you could do it a lot cheaper than the city could. If you had to choose between the two, install the sidewalk today in however imperfect a manner, or pay the fee in lieu, how would that look? Which would you do?
They would probably not install the sidewalk. They'd probably pay the fee, because it doesn't make sense to put it up by the security fence and attract people to their secure parking lot. So, and it'd be, it's the only 1,000 foot of sidewalk within a mile, so.
Members?
Well, I'm kind of like Jeff. If the city decides to improve that or widen the road, the city is going to let out a bid, and inevitably that bid's going to include a sidewalk. And so agreeing to them to come back and build a sidewalk, I think, is kind of a useless effort.
It might, definitely would reduce the cost of the project. If it's part of the original bid and it doesn't have to get done, they can put that money someplace else. I mean, it's not like it's just going to be lost, but...
And I think that's part of our concern is, like I said, I have what Ms. Miller told me that they were working on, but I don't have anything, and I tried to contact her to see if there's something concrete, because we don't want to hold up the CO. We're trying to get an occupancy permit on this, and this is the issue.
I guess I should ask if there's anybody else here that wants to be heard on this today. Anybody else standing and saying no? I guess not. Okay.
All these people came as my support.
Members?
I think if you want a continuance to try to work out a fee in lieu of proposal to bring back for our consideration, that's your call. But as it stands now, I can't support the application.
Okay. Well, let's, if you don't mind, and I appreciate you indulging me, let's continue it, and if we get something worked out, we can withdraw before the next hearing.
To what would be your requested meeting for continuance? The next meeting?
Yeah.
Any objection from anybody? I'll make a motion to continue case number 14330 to the April 20th meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue case number 14330 until April 20th meeting. Would you cast your votes, please?
Thank you for your time.
Continued.
Item number 2, case number 14336, request of Max Garten for a variance to the requirement that an accessory building be constructed behind the rear wall of the main structure, side yard setback, and required distance between the accessory structure and the main building in the R1 single-family residential district located at 11104 Southwest 38th Circle.
Would you state your name and address for the record, please?
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Tyler Garten. I'm actually speaking on behalf of Max Garten today. I've been the one that's been trying to take care of all of this since we've got notice of anything. He lives at 11104 Southwest 38th Circle. I'm here just trying to figure out and make sure that I'm able to get a permit, trying to acquire a permit and variance for it after a little bit of deceit from builders and things like that. So I was told that we did not need a permit or this or that, and now I'm just trying to make everything legal with you guys, and hopefully I can do that with you.
So tell us exactly what it is that you're asking for, please.
So what I'm asking for is a variance on the building there as seen. As you can see, it's close to the neighboring fence. It has about a foot and a half gap there, and then on the closeness to the main structure, it is 5 feet instead of the required 6 feet. And the third variance would be being able to have a building have a storage building behind the back wall of the house. There's no possible way that I could have any kind of building behind the back wall of the house. The yard has a steep slope once you kind of take about 2 steps off the back porch to a drainage ditch. I wouldn't be able to have it behind a back wall or be able to keep it 10 feet away because the fence is about 12 feet away from the back porch.
What is the size of your accessory building then?
The size of the building is 24 by 25 and 13 feet tall.
I did go out to the site. It took a while. My navigation system had no clue
It's a new
where you were. So it's a very new development.
Yes.
How new is the development?
The neighborhood,
Yes.
I want to say at least in the last 5 years.
Now, staff says they think you can put it in the back. I think there was a staff comment that it could be placed.
For the side separation and the separation from the house, but not from the back of the house.
I
From the
couldn't do it
back,
from the back
okay.
of the house, and I would be open to other ways if I need to make adjustments with the building. But as it sits right now, it requires those 3.
There are numerous objections written in this application, and I personally went out there, and it looks like it's a house in between the two houses. It's so close to the adjacent house in the cul-de-sac, and it's big, and it is not in keeping with the cul-de-sac or the development, in my view.
Okay.
It just doesn't, and I can understand the objections,
Yes.
although we're not involved with all the restrictions. The adjoining landowners and everything could probably litigate that issue privately. But personally, I just can't support this application at all.
We do have someone signed up to speak on this matter. Annette Pratchard, is it?
I do want to give one more thing before I step away. I have spoken with a building mover, and it would be possible for me to move it back further to where the only variance that I would not be able to comply with would be the one behind the back wall of the house. That way I could get it away from the neighbor's fence, the house. I would be able to stay well within what you guys would like for those other two variances, but there's just simply no way that I could acquire, I couldn't get around that one variance.
What's the square footage of the building?
I don't know that off the top of my head. It's an empty building that's 24 by 25.
It's 24 by 25?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks.
Ms. Pratchard? Would you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Annette Pratchard. I am the neighbor at 11100 Southwest 38th Circle. That's the neighboring fence. We're the house that's right next door to them. Our biggest concern is the decreasing of our property value. I walk out the door and I look at this huge eyesore every day. We've spent a lot of money, and we're one of the people in the packet that is refusing to agree to this variance. The neighborhood itself, our new two streets, has only been there for just over 2 years. So my husband and I spent a good amount of money to buy our first house, and then to have this eyesore built right next door to us that's the size of the house in between. It's just bad. Our request is for you to decline the variance and possibly have it removed. There's several other neighbors that weren't able to make it today, but they have the same view that it's an eyesore, and we're concerned about our property value decreasing.
Board members have any questions for Ms. Pratchard? I see a hand go up in the back. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I see a hand up in the back. Is there somebody else who wants to speak on this matter? Please come down. Give us your name and address for the record.
My name is Andrea Jarrett, and I'm actually the vice president of the HOA of Johnson Farms, and I also live in the complex as well. I live at 11012 Southwest 38th Circle, and I'm actually, so the house that's directly behind them, I'm one over from that. And we live also along the drainage ditch that he's referring to. And the concern, other than, because my next door neighbor actually lives directly behind him, wanted to be here today, but he's Air Force and all of that, so he wasn't able to actually be here to speak on his behalf as well. So I thought I would come and hopefully give my 2 cents and try to help out with the situation. Our concerns, HOA-wise, is that it's in more than just 3 violations of even just our HOA codes. I know that HOA versus the city codes are separate ordinances, but it also violates the same ordinances that it does for you guys, it does for us. All structures are supposed to be made out of the same, or at least I think 80% of the same materials that your house is even made out of, which is not the case in this structure. It's also too tall of a structure and too large of a structure, along with it being not far enough away from the fence. We don't really care where it is in your yard, HOA-wise, but the height of it, the issue is that it needs to be no taller than fence height, because the concern is there's a little leeway. If say my yard is higher than the yard behind us, it goes down just because of the way water flows. You don't want to change that. Of course, you can't obstruct water. But with as large as that structure is, it will cast overshadows and all of that on other people's yards and cause other issues. That's why in the HOA that we don't like to have such large structures, because, I mean, you've got kids playing out there and everything else. You're not only obstructing your yard, but you're also messing with other people's, plants and whatever else might be in their yard at their own will. So that's kind of, we have obviously an issue with that as well, and we could issue a lien on their house for this being in there, but we would just like for it to be, since it's already been brought up in this way, we'd like to just have it removed is our plan. And they will eventually, if they haven't already, gotten a violation in the mail from our staff to have a lien put against their house. So one way or another, they won't be able to sell their house eventually unless the project is removed or redone to fit the standards of the HOA.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Could I ask the chair if she would ask the applicant to come back to the podium, please?
Sure.
I'm going to oppose your request today, and we're not trying to impose a hardship on you. The guy who built this building knew there was a permit that was required and did you a disservice by not doing that.
Yes, I've been trying to figure that
You've got covenants and restrictions, which are not our issue today, but what I'm going to suggest to you is whoever, has told you they can move this, help you find a new home in a place where a building of this size is appropriate, and then you look at another outbuilding that's in compliance with the covenants and restrictions in your neighborhood, and that you do it in consultation with them, and also that you're mindful of what the city requires. And city staff, I'm sure, and others will assist you with your site and your uneven terrain and help you work out those issues. But again, we're not trying to create a hardship for you, but I think there's a justification. I cannot support your application. Therefore, if there's no more discussion, if you had anything else to say.
If I were able to move the building, I know it's a bit large and things like that, but if I were to make it look like the house and apply to all the things that we're looking at today, just by moving it and adding things to it, could I still keep the building then?
That wouldn't be enough for me.
You're asking us to address things that aren't within our purview.
Okay.
You're not here for a variance on color or building material. You're here for a variance on setbacks.
That's true.
Your covenants are going to provide private restrictions that your neighbors do sound like they intend to enforce against you, and that's got nothing to do with us. But
Okay.
As it relates to the setbacks and stuff, I'm in agreement. So if you don't have any further comment, I'm going to make a motion to deny the application.
Okay. Just real quick, suggestions for moving forward, just because I have no prior experience with any of this. I'm just kind of winging it, guys.
Yep.
So,
I would talk to a lawyer.
okay. Okay.
That's a lawyer telling you that, so.
Okay.
But yes, your contractor certainly did not do you any favors here.
Okay.
Whoever put this building where they put it, I think knew full well that it was really not permitted to be there.
Okay.
So I'm sorry that he or she is not here with us today.
Yeah, that would be quite helpful. So, basically, at this point, what are my options to? I guess I'm looking to either remove or make the building smaller. What are my options at this point? From you guys,
I'm not giving you legal advice, but I believe that if we don't grant the variance,
then I don't get a
you've got to
permit.
move the building.
Yes. Okay.
So
I think that would be it for my questions.
I have a motion
Yep.
Second.
and a second to deny the variance, case number 14336. Would you cast your votes, please? It is denied.
All right. Thank you.
Item number 3, case number 14341, request of Ellis Manufacturing Company for a variance to permit parking and maneuvering on the street right-of-way in the I-2 Moderate Industrial District located at 4803 North Cooper Avenue.
Would you give us your name and address, please?
Brent Hombo, Vice President of Ellis Manufacturing, 4803 North Cooper Avenue, Oklahoma City. I'm here to request 7 new parking spaces. Ellis is a small family business. My grandfather and my father started it and built that building in 1956. And at that time, there was, I believe they built 7 parking places. So last year, we were here and we requested another 6 parking places and a handicap place. And the Board of Adjustment granted that to us, and that really helped a lot because we needed a lot more spaces. Currently, we have about 18 people working there, including myself and my son. And right now we've got 13 parking places and 1 handicap place. So some of the people that work there, some of us have to park in the street, and we also have to use some of the parking places at the business next door. We have to rent those places. It's about $30 per car per month, so that's 6 cars over there. Then we've got some parking in the street right now.
The one question I would have for you is, in the materials that you submitted to us, the statement is made that the proposed 7 new parking spaces are the last possible spaces available for employee or customer parking. And the unfavorable considerations listed by staff include the statement that there is space on the property to add parking in the storage lot. So could you reconcile those 2 things for me? Why aren't you parking in your storage lot instead of on the street?
Well, there's equipment out there. We rent equipment to the contractors, and it's full. It's a yard, equipment yard, and we park our trucks in there too at night. So there's really, we would have to reduce the size of the lot that has equipment in it to do all that, and this space that's available right there on the street, to me, would be the best choice because we wouldn't have to reduce our equipment yard any.
I do actually have one other question. As I went by and looked at this, there's a hydrant on the street that seemed to me to be part of the space where you were talking about putting these parking spaces. How would you work around that?
Well, the parking spaces are drawn in to the side of that hydrant, like 13 feet away from it.
The hydrant is shown on the drawing, the existing fire hydrant and riser valve. It's shown to be south of the proposed 7 parking spaces, correct?
Right.
Okay, so you're north of that and can give it the clearance it needs.
Yeah, the parking spaces that we're asking for are north of the fire hydrant.
Okay. I should ask, is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this matter today? No? Members of the board? Comments? Questions?
I do. Street parking, I think, is less than ideal if it's your last, reasonable choice. The one advantage you have when you street park is the people can walk on the grassy area, they can get into their car, they can look and make sure there's no traffic. When it's time to exit their parking spot and go into the street, they can look in their driver's side, mirror and see if there's oncoming traffic, and they can glance over their shoulder. Cindy, go back to the other slide that shows where they pull in off the problem with that, and I have a sedan and a pickup, is you're backing into a street. And you've got SUVs, you've got the Suburban, you've got the pickup, things like that. Those sedans don't have any sight line until they're well into the street. And this may not be a real heavily traveled street, and it may not have a real high speed limit. But to me, that is potentially more unsafe than parallel parking in the street.
Well, we've got a sign posted at the end of one end of the block, 25 miles an hour. The other end, it doesn't have anything.
Even at 25, if you back into traffic, and you don't see anybody until you're well back out of your parking space. Because you can't see, at least if it's all sedans, you have a reasonable expectation that you may be able to see, back out, and you can see across their trunk, and you have better sight. That's my concern, and driving both a larger vehicle like a pickup and a smaller one like a sedan, there are times that you simply can't see. And it's not like you're backing into a parking area where sometimes, they're driving 25. You're backing into a street. And that's my concern, that it's potentially safer for you guys to continue if you don't have any other recourse. Park in the street, parallel park in the street. You've got a better opportunity to merge into traffic safely and not get hit.
My only comment regarding that, I don't know what the number of spaces would be versus with either alternative street parking versus your proposal. The only thing I would note is in the application, there is very little traffic that goes around that business area in terms of cars, except for the people who are working there, as far as I can.
It's not a heavily traveled area, really, except occasionally there's a line of cars coming through after work, like at 4 or 5, and then before work, there's people that are coming and going. And sometimes there tends to be a bottleneck in there because we park on the street and the cars have to kind of slow down and go through there.
What you're saying is on the storage area that you have so much equipment and other things moving there that it wouldn't be a hazard to provide
I would
parking?
think it would be. If you park your cars back there, there's always a chance they could get hit with something, forklifts or...
When do they move them back there, or is there a particular time of day?
Yeah, about 4 o'clock. They move the trucks back there, the delivery trucks.
And what are the hours of operation for the workers?
8 to 5, approximately. There's 2 businesses there. One is Ellis Manufacturing Company that owns the building and the land, and then one of them is Ellis Construction Accessories, which rents the north yard space from Ellis Manufacturing. And that's my brother who runs that business.
You said that you do have access to off-street parking, but you have to pay for it in a neighborhood?
Is
Yeah,
that the lots to the south of you?
Yes. It's Market Source. And they rent us 6 spaces over there, which we'd like to get out of if we can.
I'm going to have trouble supporting your request, and again, it's more of a safety issue. I'm not trying to deny you a solution for your employees, but to me, it is less safe, to create this parking where you back into a street, and you have, poor sight lines sometimes until you're well out in the street before you can even see oncoming traffic. So you may be able to negotiate better terms with your neighbor where you're currently paying to park. You may be able to reconfigure your storage yard or look at it creatively and find a way where you might be able to incorporate some of your needs into that area. But I'm not going to be able to support your application as it stands.
Okay.
Well, I really appreciate your comments and your observations, but I have to say, we're kind of experimenting with more of the nose-in parking is how I think of it. I live over off of Western, And
If it was angled so that you had, better visibility as you were trying to back out, perhaps that might be worth considering. If you're just totally perpendicular to the street, you have...
Aren't you trading one public safety concern for another, though?
No.
I mean...
Because parallel parking, first of all, you can look, you walk around the front of your car.
Yeah, but you've got cars on both sides of the road, Jeff, that are going to park there. I think probably what saves this thing for me on your application is that I'm pretty familiar with the Santa Fe Industrial District. And it was designed at a time when, rail was essentially, the dominant way of moving, and it was dry goods storage. And so all these buildings are lot line to lot line. They weren't thought through for distribution use, which is essentially what they're used for now, is, distribution use of goods, or in your case, equipment, whatever it is. But there's just very limited ways to maneuver around that. And maybe I'm a little overly sensitive to the idea that he doesn't want those vehicles in his yard because that reduces the amount of function that his property offers for his business. But at the same time, too, you've got cars in the street that are going to, inhibit maneuverability of things like fire trucks and traffic that are coming through there during the day, and semi-trucks and other things. And to get those things off the road probably allows them to move more freely. I agree with your concern. I just think that aspect of it for me is a trade-off. You get one problem or you get another, and I bet we could come up with 3 or 4 more of those each way.
But it's not his only option.
I understand. I think the reason that I support the application is primarily based on the idea that, there isn't a lot of room to move down there. Frankly, I'm surprised you even have a yard. What a blessing.
It's full.
Because Santa Fe, typically their buildings don't have yards. They're just lot line to lot line construction. So I support the application primarily because of that fact. It is very peculiar down here, and I think the off-street parking is the best way he has to sort of balance all these competing interests of keeping his business functional and at the same time trying to pick between public safety concerns of backing into traffic or being on street from 8 to 5. So,
is it possible for the parking spaces to be angled and not be totally perpendicular to the street?
Yeah, I think
To
so.
me, if you did that, then when people were backing out, they wouldn't have to back as far out
we should have thought that last year.
before they could.
They could come in from the north, driving south, and they could just pull in to the right, going west at an angle.
My only concern
that.
is I know, and all of us do, that have pulled into a parking spot where there's a larger vehicle next to us, even at the mall or in a Target, lot, you have to pull out a certain amount before you can see what's oncoming from either direction.
Yeah, I know.
And so I'm not trying to deny you a solution to your problem, but I am thinking, as
No, I think your observations are well placed. It is true, though, that traffic moves, I would say, unusually slow over in this area. People are just not always driving cars, for one thing. There are various vehicles that they're in and moving from place to place. And the idea that you could put your parking on site, I was being a little bit facetious when I asked you that question earlier, because having peeked into that yard, not only is it full, but I wouldn't want to drive in there and park. It looked like there were about 10 things that could fall on your head if you got out of the car. I hate to get out of the car parking on the street. I equally hate to have to back out of a parking place without being able to see what's going on behind me. And
close to this property, the old TGNY distribution center had lots and lots of parking configured the way he wants to do this. It's easy to back in and out of that because there are very few cars that park there anymore, but you can imagine in Santa Fe, traffic is heavier and faster moving. If that building was fully utilized and that lot was full or essentially full most of the time, it's dangerous, the way it's configured now, to back out into Santa Fe and not be able to see what's coming. And that's my concern. I know that Cooper doesn't carry a lot of traffic now. None of us has a crystal ball and knows, how these areas are going to change and how uses are going to change around you. Again, I'm not trying to deny you a solution to your problem, but I'm thinking as a citizen too, and
Well, I mean, he's agreeable to the angled
Yeah.
spaces, and
Yeah,
if
if
you're...
you'll let us build 7 more places over there, we'll make it at a 45-degree angle. Is that what it usually is?
I would do it in
Instead of-
consultation with,
Their
you know, your
staff will be
engineer.
able to
and-
help you with that. They'll figure that out for you.
But if you would be agreeable to angle parking,
Yeah.
I
can
would
do that.
support your application, and as a matter of fact, would make a motion to approve it contingent upon.
From the standpoint of our role of the Board of Adjustment, traffic flow and safety, is that something that, from the Board of Adjustment standpoint, we should be even examining?
I think it's in line with the effects on the comprehensive plan. I mean, and yeah, I think so. I
Absolutely.
think the element there is, it's appropriate to examine those things. Because it's the intention of the ordinance. The reason they don't want you maneuvering in the public right-of-way, right, is because of the fact that it creates these public safety issues. And so if you're going to circumvent the ordinance, you have to be convinced that this is unique enough, and so on and so forth, to circumvent that ordinance, which in this case, that's why I made the comments I did about the district. It's kind of funny, coming here, I left an office building in Bethany, and I had to back out onto 39th Street. Talk about taking your life in your own hands. It's 45 miles an hour. So I get it, but this isn't 39th Street Expressway either. This is the Santa Fe Industrial District.
Right.
So, yeah.
Traffic usually goes slow through there.
So I have a motion
Second.
and a second.
I just was, before we go any further, do we want to continue this so we make sure we have that plan in place to make sure it works?
No, I think he can work that out. So I have a motion and a second to approve variance case number 14341. Would you cast your votes, please? It is
You have the
approved.
contingency that the...
Yes, with the contingency that the parking spaces will be angled, and you'll work with staff.
What's the normal angle for an angle? Like,
I'm sure
we'll get with...
John Wilson right
We'll
there is
work that
going to
out
help
with plan
us fix
review.
that
Okay.
We'll
problem.
get that worked out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Item number 4, case number 14342, request of Genevieve Zerger for a variance to the 25-foot front yard setback in the R1 Single Family Residential District located at 2640 Northwest 25th Street.
Hello, I'm Genevieve Zerger. I live at 2640 Northwest 25th Street.
Tell us about your application.
Okay, so when I moved into the house in August, there were just 3 steep steps. The previous porch was made into the entryway, and so I felt like I really needed something. It was very difficult to get into my house, especially if I was carrying something. I had to step up to the second step and then open the door and then step up another step to get in. So I started trying to think of ideas of, what kind of porch did I want. And my neighbor that lives 5 houses down, I did submit a picture of her deck, Carol, looked really nice, I thought. And so I asked her who built your deck. I would like a porch like that, and she referred me to John over here, and...
A contractor in attendance, no doubt.
Yes. He built the deck. He built the deck. I guess neither of us knew we needed a permit, so he built it, and then I guess someone called the city, and then I found out that it was too close to the middle of the street, apparently. My house is 49 feet from the middle of the street, which apparently is the ordinance of nothing can be closer to that, and I did not know that. So I'm requesting that I get to keep the deck. It serves as a porch, and I was also hoping it would serve as maybe a gathering place for the neighbors at times. Carol does that with her deck, and it's nice our neighborhood is very friendly. I live in the Cleveland neighborhood, and you can see from the pictures that you can't even see the deck from the neighbor's homes. Like, this is the neighbor to the west, that left picture. It's very hard to see my deck from her yard, and then from the other yard, you can't see it at all. There's a bush blocking it. The only way you can even see the deck is from directly across the street, and I did get a letter that you guys have from David Hoke. He's my neighbor that lives directly across the street. And do you have that? Because I submitted it last week.
We do. And you know, normally we ask people when they come to us on things like this if they've talked to their neighbors.
Oh, yes, I've talked to every neighbor. As you can see, I got 8 letters.
That's pretty clear.
Including the HOA president.
Pretty impressive, actually.
So everyone loves it. I've not met anyone that doesn't like the deck. And in fact, and then you got that other letter from Steve Poplick that thinks that it would help deter crime if the neighbors are out front, in front of their homes, instead of in the back of their homes. And our neighborhood itself is not crime-ridden, but there are many crime-ridden neighborhoods nearby, and criminals do come very often. On Nextdoor, reading about people checking car doors and stealing from people's cars all the time. And I think the more people are out in front of their homes, the less maybe that would happen.
How far into the setback does the porch?
It's 36 feet from the middle of the street. I have.
Do you know how far it intrudes into the required 25-foot setback?
Well, let's see, my house is 49 feet, and it's 36 feet from, so 13 feet is how. Now, Carol's deck, I measured Carol's deck too, and she did get a permit for her deck. Her deck is 43 feet 2 inches from the middle of the street, so it's not, she got a permit somehow, even though it is also within the setback, so.
The house is supposed to be 50 feet back, and then you can have a porch that goes out 6 feet into that area.
Oh, okay.
So it's about 4 to 5 feet out into the area.
I wasn't aware of that, so, sorry.
I have to say, I drove to look at this, and it really does not strike you. I mean, sometimes these kind of encroachments into the front yard setback especially kind of pop out at you. Mm-hmm. This one, it really is just not that noticeable.
Would there have been any other issues with the permit or the application to build this porch except for the setback?
Just a setback. That's the only thing.
So let me ask if there's anybody else here who wants to be heard on this today. Any of you other folks? No? Okay.
Would you call the contractor, please?
Would you come and speak to us, please, sir? Yes, ma'am. Give us your name and address for the record, please.
My name and what?
I'm sorry?
John Hyatt,
John Hyatt, and your address.
4306 Butler Place.
John, are you a licensed contractor?
In Oklahoma, you don't have to have a license. There's no provision for a license.
Okay. And you
Well, with plumbing and electrical and fencing, actually.
Okay.
But as far as residential license goes, no.
Okay. And you were not aware that a building permit was required?
No, I have always gone with the 30-inch rule. That's been in my head forever. If it's 30 inches and under, you don't need a permit.
30 inches from what?
Ground, from the ground.
You heard that previous case where there was a backyard building,
Right.
and he wanted a variance request and we denied it?
Yes, sir.
He built that without a permit, and somebody built it for him without a permit. And you would think, that a contractor that was actively engaged in construction should know that a building permit was required. And I'm speaking for myself and maybe for some of the others on the board, it's annoying when we have homeowners that are, forced to come before us and try to justify what you've done. And it's obvious it's a nice addition and you were well-intentioned, your neighbors like it, and I think everybody agrees it was well done. But you shouldn't have had to come here, okay? Your contractor, whoever it is, should have known that a permit was required and to have known, what he could do and what he couldn't have do, and then counseled you and designed the job around compliance, and it would have saved you this time and this money. And so we've talked about this before, is making sure that the contractor community, because you guys often, walk away, you get paid, and the poor homeowner is here, and in the case of the guy who had the building, he's going to have to do something, and it's going to cost him some money. And so we have talked about this before, is employing city council to, for there to make sure that there is some way that the contractor community is better informed about the need for permits. We're not trying to punish anybody. We simply want them done, properly, correctly, in the interest of the homeowners, in the interest of you guys as contractors. And so, this is a frustration, and we hear these often, and it's the homeowner who, has to pay to be here and take time out of their day to
Yes,
be
sir.
here. So, I would, that's my frustration.
I guess in future, it probably would be a good idea for you to check with city staff. I've never heard of the 30-inch rule, but, apparently it's not universally applicable. So
It's a federal guideline.
before you undertake another one of these jobs, you might want to check with city staff about setbacks and so on.
I did talk to the inspector that tagged that thing, and he told me that in the city, if you put a deck that's 6 inches high, they want a permit, which is very new to me. I've never run with that, but believe me, I will from now on.
If there's no other discussion, I would make a motion to approve the application.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve variance in case number 14342. Would you cast your ballots, please? And that carries.
So we do appreciate you coming.
Thank you all.
Hearing, okay.
We appreciate you coming and to support your work.
Yes.
Thanks, John.
Item number 5, case number 14343, request of Crafton Toll and Associates for variance to the hard surface paving requirements in the I-3 Industrial District located at 7201 Newcastle Road.
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Spencer with Crafton Toll, 300 Point Parkway Boulevard. So before you today is a request for variance for the hard surface paving requirements for a concrete batch plant to be installed at the 7201 Newcastle Road address. This property consists of approximately 7.5 acres. It's zoned I-3. There's currently an existing industrial site with existing gravel access and drive on that property. And industrial materials are stored out there as well. The property is bordered to the south by an existing railroad. And we're requesting a variance to the hard surface paving, basically requirements for 2 items. One would be timing of the hard surface improvements, and the other would be waiving the requirement within the right-of-way of the railroad tracks. Starting with the timing, what we've asked is to allow for 6 months from start of operation of the concrete batch plant to install the required hard surface paving. Once the concrete batch plant is in operation, they'd be able to utilize their own concrete to construct the hard surface that's required. And then as far as the railroad, there's an existing driveway that's been in place for over 45 years. It has a driveway easement with the railroad. There's existing gravel drive going across it. However, at the railroad crossing, there's the railroad ties that are turned and lined up with wood. That's not necessarily hard surface paving that would meet the city's requirements, but we would, trying to pave over this and do that could potentially shut down the railroad and would be an undue hardship that we would ask for a variance on that. Gravel in this area is very common. Several of the neighboring properties have gravel yards. This site has gravel yards. In recent history, it had dump trucks operating out of it, driving back and forth over it. So we are willing to bring this into to compliance, but would just ask for a variance to allow some additional timing to do so, since it is a concrete batch plant going in.
Okay. Before we get any further, there was some discussion earlier about what concrete batch plants do. Is this a situation where concrete will be made on site and taken elsewhere for use?
That's correct.
That's what a batch plant is? Okay. And then some question in my mind about how we would know 6 months from what exactly, in terms of triggering enforcement, if we were inclined to give you a variance, how that mechanism would work for us. 6 months from the date of your certificate of occupancy, that's not a good system. So unless you're ready to go get your certificate of occupancy today, and so we can start it from today, or you're going to go get it on May the 5th, then we can start it from May the 5th.
Well, we don't have a date locked in on that. We've applied for a building permit application to install the concrete batch plant, and as part of that application, we've turned in plans. And so that's part of why we're here.
What other conditions were included in your building permit? When it came back from plan review, what other conditions were in there besides a variance for this?
Well, there were several other comments to include the hard surface paving, the number of parking places, so we've agreed to do all that. We've resubmitted a site plan that shows agreeing with that. There was also some comments on height of the structure, so we had to move the structure a little bit so that it came back into conformance with city's code.
So is this the last remaining issue from the plan review process?
That's correct.
So hypothetically, then, if this variance is granted, then you could be issued the actual building permit, is that right?
That's correct.
And so what other improvements are you completing aside from these driveway changes?
So the actual batch plant will have to be delivered to the site and then set up.
What's the construction time period of that?
Check. It's about a week.
Okay. And so how long are you anticipating that from your building permit issuance to your attempt to confirm a certificate of occupancy? What's that time frame, ballpark?
So I would think we could do it within a month.
So this is quick. That's okay. So that makes more sense to me. It's a quick construction turnaround, and so that's okay.
So if we did it, for instance, from 7 months from today instead of 6 months from the date of certificate of occupancy, that would work for you?
Where's the concrete batch plant?
Yeah, I'm not trying to squeeze you on the time. I'm just trying to set a start date.
I think given what they said, I would be okay with them conditioning it on. I mean, if we can do this, I'm staring at you awkwardly, or if we can do this, I think I'd be okay with it from the certificate of occupancy, because at that point they're operational.
No.
And that's a date.
But it's not a date that we are aware of in order to trigger our check on compliance to set as a start date. I would rather start that date from the day they leave here with their variance in hand, if they get it, rather than trying to have it triggered by something.
I would rather have a set date, months, like 7 months or 9 months.
Well,
from that time, that would be reasonable given what the proposed work is going to be, with a give or take of a month or month and a half for.
Yeah, it's not the amount of time that's the issue. It's just the start date.
Is there a way that if we said 6 months from the date of this issuance of the certificate of occupancy, that we have to check that?
We don't have a way of knowing when the certificate of occupancy is issued. That's the problem.
Do we have a way, if we say 180 days from today, is that put on some tickler system that comes back up?
Yes, if we give it a time frame, I can enter that and they'll check back on that. The certificate of occupancy is issued once all the inspections are made.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. But there's a date on the CO, right?
There's a date on the CO. I don't know when it's. I would have to be checking.
Okay.
I would have to be contacting the permit office weekly.
Daily.
That's a logistical issue. I get it. Okay.
Yes. That's the deal.
What is your proposed solution?
We'd be willing to tie it to 9 months from today. That would give us time to have the concrete batch plant delivered. It's coming from Texas, and so getting it delivered here and then the time to install it, I think that would.
So that problem solved. Let's go on to the issue of, first of all, whether we're actually issuing or being requested to issue one variance or two, because as I understand it, only part of your request is temporary. You're not seeking temporary variance from the requirement that you pave the railroad right of way.
That's correct.
That's a permanent thing.
Yes.
Okay. So that sounds to me like more like two variances, but whatever. Let's talk about that piece of it a little bit. I have some concern about just the whole issue of gravel on Newcastle Road, but as I understand it, there will be some paved surface between the gravel and Newcastle Road.
That's correct. There'll be approximately 40 feet that would be paved concrete till we hit the railroad right-of-way. So that would be paved all the way in the right-of-way of Newcastle Road where we connect on. Then the railroad right-of-way would be gravel, then it would be back to being paved. So that should contain the gravel that's there. Within that area, you've got the railroad ties as well that are already existing for that crossing that's there. So
what you're actually driving across when you're driving across the railroad right-of-way is not gravel, it's railroad ties that are set into the ground?
right where the tracks are, you've got the railroad ties. They're set tie to tie. I mean, there's no gap in between them there because it's a crossing. And then outside of that, there's some gravel. It's pretty well compacted. It's been there for a long time. The driveway's been there. Like I said, the easement goes back all the way to 1971. So it's been there a long time. There's recently been dump trucks operating out of this area. I was out there actually today and didn't see any issues with gravel pushing out onto Newcastle Road, but we would be paving, like I said, 40 feet that should prevent any
What
chance
you're
of that.
describing as paving is the approach, right? You're going to
Yes, pave the approach, and it shows on the diagram there. You see the stripe area would be the area that would remain gravel and railroad ties.
Do I understand this is a permanent location? This is not temporary? I mean, it's not being built to survey construction in the area? It's
That's
a
correct.
permanent plant project. I don't know what the criteria are for, upgrading railroad crossings. I know in Bricktown, they recently did that on a very active rail line and upgraded those crossings. So I don't know, whose responsibility it is or how it's done or how much time. I don't know how active this rail line is.
It's active. In fact, there were trains parked out there when I drove by today. It is an active railroad spur.
But it obviously can be done because, they did it in Bricktown on a line that's very active, and they upgraded those crossings.
And we've reached out to the railroad and have not heard back from them yet, but it's our understanding, we don't deal with this all the time with the railroads, that it's a time-consuming process, and as well as, obviously, to change anything to do with the tracks would shut the railroad down for a small amount of time, and feel like that would be a hardship to place on a property, of this size and for the amount of traffic, and with the fact that we've got the existing crossing that's been in use for a long, long time.
With your plan, would your hard surface paving go essentially right up, because usually the tracks are slightly raised, would your hard surface paving go very close up to where, it intersected the ties?
Well, we would stop at the railroad's right-of-way, because that's the area that they control. So there would be a gap of the existing
How far back is that
drive there.
generally from?
I don't
He's
know.
asking for 100 feet of gravel. So 50 feet
no.
on either side of the
The
railroad.
railroad easement is a private easement, Jeff, so they're going to vary from location to location, and I'm not aware if there's a standard easement that the railroads have asked for in the past or whatever the case is, but they're not going to be able to take that paving beyond that right-of-way easement. They're going to have to stop it there. So railroad's not going to let you,
we'll be at the mercy of the
attractions are
railroad,
not going
yeah.
to let you do that, but I don't have an objection to the application for whatever that's worth. It makes, what you're trying to do makes perfect sense to me. I think your request for the variance being temporary so you can use your own concrete is certainly reasonable. I support the application.
I'd support the application as well.
Why don't you make me two motions,
Okay.
one for the temporary and one for the permanent?
I'll make a motion to approve the application as to the variance for the temporary variance not to exceed 9 months. Is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
So conditioned upon a 9-month term for the hard surface paving requirement.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the variance for the hard paved surface for a period of 9 months with respect to the drive and the parking. Is that right?
Yes, the requirements by the city.
So, on case number 14343, would you cast your votes, please? And that carries.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance as it relates to that would be for the railroad, right? So, say,
I believe what they're seeking is 100 feet
Just the area of the existing drive within the
on
railroad
either side of the
right-of-way.
railroad
yeah,
track.
so essentially to approve the variance for the hard surface paving requirement for the portion of the driveway located within the existing railroad right-of-way. That's what I was...
Yes.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second to approve a variance to the hard surface paving requirements within the railroad right-of-way, case number 14343. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank y'all.
Item number 6, case number 14345, request of Brahms Ice Cream and Dairy Stores for a variance to the sign requirements in SPUD 638 district located at 12017 Northwest Expressway.
Would you state your name and address for the record, please?
Mark Grubbs, Grubbs Consulting, 1819 South Morgan Road, on behalf of the applicant. What you have today before you today is a request for a variance to the signage ordinance of the existing SPUD. The existing SPUD only allows for an 8x12 sign. The hardships, which we have multiple on this, is that this is the concept of the Brahms property, or that Brahms is currently looking at. Along the frontage of this, there is a large water line and an easement there. So that requires for the signage to be pushed back on the property. As you can see with the proposed building here, that the signage is actually back even with the front of the building. So an 8x12 sign is behind the face of the building, doesn't do much good for the property. Another hardship is that I'll just stay with this one, is that this is a highway. It's a 55-mile-an-hour highway, and they have traffic concerns with people recognizing what's there, not stopping too quickly, so they can identify that Brahms is there and start to slow down and not cause any traffic concerns there.
Is this a site that Brahms recently acquired?
Say it again.
Is this a site that Brahms recently acquired?
Brahms has not yet acquired the site.
Not yet acquired.
They're
So
looking. They're
under contract. They're under contract.
Yes.
Okay.
And the current owner is obviously signed a letter of authorization for me to represent the application on their behalf. Another hardship is obviously branding. This is it's a growing area, a lot of houses being built there, commercial area along the highway, and this application that you see before you today is actually one that we have gotten approved for Brahms along other highway applications. They would prefer their 50-foot pole sign because that's their branding. But when they come to me with that, I know the feelings of the Planning Commission and other boards, so we try to come up with something more tasteful. But anyway, at that intersection of Highway 4 and Northwest Expressway, you have McDonald's there. That has a 50-foot pole sign on top of that. And they're in direct competition with McDonald's, and so we're doing something much more tasteful, monument sign style.
Are they in the same PUD?
No, they're not, sir.
Okay.
I've also produced renderings so that we could get a perspective of the sign. This is, as we're about 300 foot east of Brahms, with the monument sign and the building shown, and you can see it's very, it's sized in relation with the building. It's not sticking up way above the building. It's not, it's got a monument. It's a monument style sign, and it's not a pole sign. The actual level of the actual brick monument is only 17 feet. And then they've got their branding, their ice cream cone that sits above that another 13 feet. I've also got other renderings as we get a little bit closer to the Brahms, so you can see relation on that side. And then also looking from the intersection side, looking back to the east, the sign as it would sit on the property. So we would just ask that this board approve the variance for this sign due to it's very specific in nature. It's only 4 Brahms, and it's, you know, that request of that size.
Here's my concern. And I understand why you're here. You're here because sort of due diligence demands that you try and get a fast result with your contract. But this is essentially, I mean, this needs to be rezoned. I don't know what the SPUD was originally designed for, because I don't have a copy of it in front of me, so I don't know what they contemplated when they approved it. But there are instances where people will come and ask for a variance from a signage restriction within a PUD that makes perfect sense. They've been there a long time, and the speed limit changed. I mean, we could go on about situations where it may be appropriate or past circumstances, but to me, it seems as if you're here just to try to get a quick resolution, when in reality, the PUD, the SPUD here needs to be looked at again to see if it's appropriate. You've got neighborhoods here, you've got other things that probably need to be considered, and they're not appropriately considered by this board. So I can't support the application on those grounds alone. It's just not the appropriate forum for it.
Okay.
Have you looked at the SPUD 638 and the approval language?
Yes, ma'am.
And it was conditioned on meeting certain, specifically on meeting certain signing requirements, is that correct?
Yes. I mean, it was a negotiated item within the SPUD. Yeah, I mean, we're familiar with SPUD. Yes, ma'am. And so you do have a couple of options. You come to this board and you ask for a variance to signage, or you write a SPUD specifically for this property, keep everything exactly the same, but only change the sign. So there's not a lot of difference in the two applications. It would, you know, and I know Commissioner Powers sits on also, you know, the Planning Commission as well, and that it would have to go before her if it came back to Planning Commission. I understand that. So,
as I said, there are instances, I mean, I have seen instances while I've been on this board where people have brought forth requests for variances on something in an SPUD or PUD that made perfect sense to grant. This is an undeveloped piece of property that's under contract. The use of that property is changing. It's surrounded by existing development. This is just not an instance where I personally feel, I'm not speaking for this, where I'm just not comfortable circumventing that process because that's why it's there.
You don't even have to look at me. You know I can't support this. This was a specifically negotiated item of the SPUD, and I could not have supported a variance. So that's 3 out of 5.
Any other comments? I'll make a motion to deny the application.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to deny the variance in case number 14345. Would you cast your votes, please? And it is denied.
Item 7, case number 14347, request of the common Z signs for variance to allow for an accessory sign to be located on the street right-of-way in the DTD1 Downtown Transitional Limited District, located at 1320 Classen Drive.
You've been very patient. Would you state your name and address for the record, please?
Rob Cosby with Z Signs, 2101 South Missouri Avenue in Oklahoma City.
Can I ask you a question before you go too much further?
Yes, ma'am.
I went by this location today to look at it, and isn't everything there already except the middle part that says the Commons?
They are, the people who built this property, they built that as initially a planter, and then later I think they believed they wanted to add the Commons, and they didn't realize, I don't think at that point, that would require a permit. I told them, of course, that would be something we'd have to pursue a permit on once we identify that planter as the property it is known for as the Commons. So at that time, I didn't realize there was a setback there because of it. It's a very odd-shaped triangle at that intersection. I thought it would be well out of the site triangle, but we went ahead and went the appropriate way and submitted application. And at that time, we realized that it was actually setting too far into what was the initial property line, I guess you would say. where it set it outside of what they considered inside the property guidelines.
This is a variance on a revocable permit.
Yes.
You know that, you mean, okay.
Yes.
So you have the authorization for the planter, but you don't have an authorization for it to be a sign?
Correct. That's my understanding. And we didn't pursue the application. We're a sign company. We came in after the planter was already permitted.
Well, you would have had to have a permit to put the planter in the right-of-way. You had to put a permit to put anything within the right-of-way.
That's what he was saying.
We didn't actually do the planter.
He's saying he didn't do it.
Oh, got it, okay.
They wanted to attach this sign to a planter that was existing, and I believe that went through the permit process on the builder's side. And I let them know that to add that signage to that planter, we would have to pursue a sign permit.
So you don't need a variance then, is your understanding, for the size of the signage or anything else? It's purely just to locate, to make a sign within a street right-of-way, that required a sign permit, a separate permit, so then you had to come back and, okay.
Yes, sir.
I got it.
Yes, sir. It's well within what they allow. It's just that corner is very odd shaped, and I think there's some issues where the building's set and the property got where they're afraid once it's a sign, it's in the site triangle, I guess, is my understanding.
He's going to have a revocable permit. We have comments from staff that say it does not appear to create a site obstruction for traffic. Unless anybody feels differently, I'm going to...
Well, staff report also says that there's an effective accessory sign on the upper face of the building, so they have signage.
So in other words, so would that require a variance? How's it zoned? It's zoned... Okay.
Ms. Powers, are you speaking of that sign up on the building, the EFS one? I noticed that as well. I really wasn't aware of that, but I guess the people who did the EFS on the building incorporated some EFS-colored signage that says the commons on the building.
My point is just that they have signage.
I understand. I guess I would note, too, that the DDRC also met and recommended approval on this. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So, is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this matter? No?
I think it's a very confusing street issues regarding that, and I think the sign would be appropriate, and I'm in favor of this. I think it's tasteful, and I think it is necessary more than something on the side of the building, especially the way those streets around 13th and all that are considered.
I will make a motion to approve the application.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second to approve the variance. Case number 14347. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
So, we don't have any board committees, do we? Board members, do you have any comments, questions, things you want to say, reports you want to make? Municipal councilor? So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. We're adjourned.